Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ask the Lawyers. I'm Leslie Rohde. Medical errors are one of the leading causes of death in the United States, killing over 250,000 people every year. Well, today we are speaking with Michael Perez of the Warshauer Law Group in Atlanta, Georgia, about medical malpractice. Michael holds an AV preeminent peer review rating from Martindale-Hubbell, the highest possible rating in both legal ability and ethical standards. And also, he was named a Georgia Super Lawyer in 2018. Michael, thanks so much for spending time with us today.
It's good to be with you.
I want to talk about medical malpractice cases in your area or in the state of Georgia. How much of this problem do you see there?
Unfortunately, we see quite a bit. We hear from folks all over the state who feel as though the result that they have had is not the one they expected, whether it was through medical treatment or through a surgery, or something happened that just doesn't seem right. And so they have questions for us and want to know whether or not they were, in fact, the victim of medical negligence.
One of those questions may be this. I wonder the difference between when you hear medical malpractice or something that's just a bad outcome of a surgery, because we know when we have surgery, we take risks.
Absolutely, and there certainly are bad outcomes that even the best of surgeons doing their very best job could not have avoided. And those types of cases are not what we consider medical malpractice. We also see times when folks have really bad outcomes, and there may have been negligence, but the negligence and the bad outcome aren't linked. The negligence isn't what caused the bad outcome. And those are usually not cases either. But unfortunately, a lot of times we see situations where folks have gone in, and because of sloppy medicine or surgical errors, there has been, in fact, negligence that has resulted. And in those cases, we will investigate and determine whether or not there's a medical malpractice case that we can go forward with.
So tell us what a plaintiff has to prove in a medical malpractice case.
Sure. So in medical malpractice, there are three main elements that have to be proven in any case. The first is a departure from the standard of care. And that is, we have to be able to show that the doctor, the surgeon, the nurse, whoever it is, the healthcare professional that we are suing, departed from the standard of care, did something that a ordinary nurse or healthcare provider, physician would not have done under the same circumstances. So that's the first thing we have to show. And typically, and in fact, in Georgia, what we have to do is we have to do that with expert testimony. So there has to be another physician who says, or another nurse who says, hey, this was a departure from the standard of care. This should not have happened. The second thing that we have to establish is, that there have been damages. And so whatever it was that happened, that it caused an actual damage to the person, physical, they've lost a limb as a result of the malpractice, or they've gone through a tremendous amount of pain and suffering, they've incurred medical costs. Those are what we call damages that the person could be compensated for. And then the third element is what I like to call the link between those two things, and that's called causation. We have to show that departure from the standard of care, what that healthcare provider failed to do or didn't do properly, caused the damages in this person's case. So that example I told you about earlier, if you have someone who has been injured, who has damage, but it's not necessarily flowing from the negligence, that wouldn't be a good case. We have to be able to link those two elements. And so that's what you have to prove in Georgia for a medical malpractice case.
We continue to hear standard of care. Could you go a little deeper with us on that and explain to us what that is?
Sure. So very generally, standard of care is the exercise of an ordinary degree of care and skill. And when we're talking about physicians and healthcare providers, what we say is they have a duty to exercise that ordinary care and skill that another physician in the same or similar circumstances would do in the same situation. So I told people all the time, folks all the time, look, if you took a a room full of doctors who practice the same kind of medicine as the doctor that you feel like did something wrong in your case. And you had 5 or 6 of them who said, well, hey, I would have done the same thing this doctor did. That's probably not going to be a departure from the standard of care, because doctors may have 2 or 3 options to treat a patient, and as long as it's an acceptable one that other doctors would choose, then that's within the standard of care. But if you have a room full of physicians and they're looking at this case and they see what the doctor did that's alleged to be negligent and say, I never would have done that. I don't know anyone who would have done that. That's not an acceptable approach under the standard of care, under how we practice medicine today. Then that is what we call a departure from the standard of care.
I know you've handled many of these cases. Do you care to share any general examples of the kinds of clients' cases that you have dealt with?
Sure. So I'll tell you about one that we tried in Cobb County not too long ago. And we were able to fortunately get a verdict for the gentleman whose wife died while in the hospital. And she had been in a tragic car accident. And she went to the hospital with a lot of bruises and a lot of injuries, and was in the ICU for a period of time. But they did their job there in the hospital, and they got her doing better, and they released her to the floor. So she was going, a step down in the level of care with the hopes of being released and going home, and things were looking that way. But as part of her pain management, she was given what we know are very powerful drugs, opioids, to help her recover. Well, she was getting a lot of opioids, and she was getting 3 different kinds. She was getting it through a pain pump. She was getting it orally through 2 different prescriptions. They were all being ordered by a physician who was taking care of her at the hospital and being monitored by nurses who worked for the hospital. And when you have somebody on that much opioid medication, it's known that can cause a depression in your breathing. It can cause your breathing to slow down, for you to have a harder time doing that. And as a result, your oxygen saturations will drop. Because of that, we have machines that will monitor your oxygen saturations to make sure that that your respiratory work is not decreasing too much to put you at risk. Well, unfortunately, our client's wife was not on one of those that continuously monitored her breathing. And as a result, over a period of days, the medications made her breathing slower and slower. And this is while she was at the hospital under the care of nurses and a physician. And ultimately, her breathing gets so slow that she goes into what's called respiratory depression and then respiratory failure. And once she went into that respiratory failure, they were able to revive her, but ultimately, over the course of months, she passed away. And it was a very tragic case. That was, again, one of those things that should not have happened. We were able to bring experts in who said, you know what, this should not have happened. And the standard of care in this kind of case for the physician would require not ordering that many opioids and not putting that person on so much medication without watching their breathing. The nurse should have been alerted, should have been monitoring more closely her breathing. And if those things had been done, our client's wife would still be alive. And like I said, we were able to get a very successful verdict here for that family. And we're able and glad to be able to provide some sense of justice for this man's loss.
I'm sure that satisfaction of that sense of justice had to be great. When clients come to you like that has to be a really hard place to be. What do you advise them to do first?
Well, I think the first step is to consult with a lawyer. Once, for folks who are suffering from the malpractice themselves, I always tell them first, take care of yourself physically. Make sure that you're getting appropriate medical care and taking care of whatever has been the result of your malpractice. But then consult an attorney. because you do have legal rights. And this is a very confusing area for folks. It's not something that we hope to be dealing with. Uh, it's part of the tragedy of doing what we do, but I don't want people to come see me because it means that something very bad has happened to them or to a loved one. But I take great honor in being able to provide them with legal counsel and looking at their case to determine whether or not they have something that we can pursue to help them get at least an answer to why what happened, and to maybe get them some justice and some compensation for their serious injuries.
And we're glad you're there doing that for sure. I want to bring up a topic that sometimes can be a little controversial. There are people out there that say that these medical malpractice lawsuits are just driving up the cost of health care. In your opinion, do you think it is?
I don't think it is. And I think, what is really happening is that medical malpractice lawsuits that are being brought by lawyers who know what they're doing and who know what a medical malpractice case is and is not, are making healthcare safer. I've had experts who've talked to me, who've served in our cases, who've said, one of the reasons I do expert work is I get to see the mistakes that other folks make and the sloppiness that other people are making that they shouldn't have been making. And it makes me a better doctor. It makes me do a better job when I'm in the operating room or when I'm in the patient room taking care of a patient. So I think there are studies out there that bear out the fact that higher insurance premiums, things of that nature, aren't directed at medical malpractice lawsuits. The reality is that the bar to file such a case is very high. And so the cases that are being filed, and certainly the cases that I file as an attorney in medical malpractice cases, are cases with catastrophic injuries where the negligence is very clear and there is a wrong that's been committed. And our civil justice system allows for someone to be compensated for that. And those claims and those lawsuits are a very, very slim number of what's actually going into the cost of healthcare in this country.
Michael, what do you want to leave people with? Takeaways for people who are watching who may have dealt with something that they think may be medical malpractice, or they have a loved one who they think has dealt with this. What takeaways do you have for them?
The biggest takeaway I would have for them is that we live in a wonderful country that gives us this opportunity to have your case heard in a court of law. And before you get there, we offer free consultations to sit down with you and tell you whether or not you have a case that we would be able to bring on your behalf. And if you do have one, again, we live in a wonderful country that has a system in place that will allow you to bring a case and to get justice. And I know it's a very scary notion. It's a very scary time in your life because if you've been the victim of malpractice, you've gone through some pretty horrible things and have had your life turned upside down. And at our firm, we have the capabilities of working with you to work with you through that process to help you get the answers to the difficult questions you have, and also to help you through the process and to see if we can get compensation for you that will help pay for costly medical care that will help compensate you for the difficulties you've been through.
Michael Perez, Warshauer Law Group in Atlanta, thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
We want to thank all of you for watching. And reminder, though, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you don't want to miss another episode here of Ask the Lawyers. I'm Leslie Rohde for AskTheLawyers.com, where you can choose a lawyer that lawyers choose.